Good afternoon. Welcome to the OPPI Digital Knowledge Series in collaboration with IPA and IDMA. As they say, to improve is to change. To be perfect is to change often. The COVID-19 challenge is becoming the accelerator towards change and perfection. It is redefining the way we communicate, learn, lead, and live. Today's webinar, brought to us by the experts from FERRY Group, talks about what it takes for organizations to lead in this post-COVID scenario. Once again, without much ado, I would like to welcome everybody to this knowledge session. A warm welcome to the IPA and IDMA members who are participating in huge numbers. Look forward to a learning session, and over to our chair of the OPPI HR committee, Mr. Satya Narayanan, who is also the managing director of Galderma South Asia. Over to you, Satya.
Thank you, Bhavna. Good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to each and everybody on behalf of OPPI HR committee. As Bhavna mentioned, OPPI Digital Knowledge Series is truly a pan-industry initiative. I'd like to thank all the IPA, IDMA members who joined the call on this webinar today. At the outset, I'd like to thank the team FERRY, Rajiv Krishnan, who is the Managing Director of FERRY Group, with over 25 years of people and organizational and consulting services experience, as well as a sales and marketing experience in Indian and MNC organization. Thank you, Rajiv, for partnering with OPPI. And of course, a big thanks to Shilpa, who is the senior client partner and also head of life sciences and healthcare services. Shilpa is no stranger to the OPPI members, and she has partnered with many multinational and Indian organizations in the industry to build the leadership teams. When we spoke to her, she readily agreed and put the sessions together. We are here today for the webinar on organization and leadership in a post-COVID world. As you all know, COVID-19 has reset, remodified, transformed the way we all do our business. But the larger question is how massive this transformation will impact the workplace, you and your team and your organization. COVID-19 crisis has united us in the sense we are all adjusting to the new normal and the challenges and opportunities. After the pandemic, the world will be different, you all know. The new normal will bring in a lot of changes like limited gatherings, travel restrictions, hygiene requirements, remote working, telemedicine, consumer behavior changing completely, and supply chain disruption, etc. The leaders of today will have to redefine and most importantly, reimagine the role of organizations with the newer skills like remote working and reskilling. Online learning modules will become the part of the new norm and will radically transform the corporate learning. As the business leaders, we need to evaluate the priorities, challenge our own perceptions, and lead through this crisis and disruption. This is an opportunity to show us how to lead the crisis as we navigate the unprecedented journey in the coming weeks and months. Now, I'd like to invite my colleague and also the co-chair of OPPI HR committee, Maninder Siingh, to say a few words and also introduce the speaker. Over to you, Maninder.
Thank you, Satya. Good afternoon to everyone. I feel today's scenario is that if we do a pestle analysis, right, all the aspect of pestle is impacted very badly. May it be political, may it be social, technical, legal, and that's the reason I say that word has changed. And this word has changed forever. Today, if you wish, you can predefine the word you can define the word in pre-COVID and the post-COVID word. I feel in the current situation, two things are very, very important. One is the adaptability. Adoption is the key to success, how quickly you adopt. And second is, all of us, we have read survival for the fittest theory. I feel we need to little tweak it, and today The theory or the concept is survival for the quickest. And on this basis, I can suggest that we cannot do the business in the current scenario as we were doing the business in the past. Companies will create an ecosystem devoted to creating an artificial intelligence empowered skills inventory, reskilling and exploring new private partnership with traditional and non-traditional way of doing business. Skill-based hiring will become a norm. As someone rightly remarked, the post-COVID world will open into a future where machine will handle problem solving and human will focus on problem finding. As they say that every major crisis brings about innovation, reflection, and the change. Leading the organization in the post-COVID world will experience all the three along as a new normal center around the virtual and the digital experience for employee and organization. Colleagues, reskilling, upskilling and cross-skillings are going to be more important than ever, as well as having a learner as the center mentality. The new normal will be more dynamic, more nimble and able to function outside of our comfort zone in really fluid manner. I feel to hear more on organization and leadership in the post-COVID world, let me turn to our expert from KORN FERRY Group. We are delighted to have today with us Mr. Gurprriet Siingh, who is a senior client partner, leadership and talent practice, KORN FERRY Group. Gurprriet has over 2 decade experience and in multi-sector experience across from FMCG to telecom, power, manufacturing, infrastructure, IT, BPO, including pharma industry. And he has worked across geography, US, UK, and Asia. Gurprriet believes that evolved leaders lead and become evolved citizens. So welcome Gurprriet. Moving to the another eminent panelist, Mr. Nishith Mohanty, who is working as a client partner, KORN FERRY Group, and Nishith helps organization function more like a tech company and helps the people to transform into the digital leader. He has evolved. He has advised several organizations on their organization design, leadership capability, and culture in their journey from analog to digital. Nishith is an expert in designing agile organizations, developing digital leaders, and building agile culture. Let me welcome Amrita Siingh, who is working as associate principal and worked in cross-culture team across location, not only in India, even in Europe, US and Singapore. Partnering with the client for a large-scale transformation, impacting the feet on the street to the C-suites. Her experience span organization change, leadership development for the digital age, cultural transformation, process modeling and big data. Amrita also has a deep expertise in the area of behavior design, behavior change related development, drawing from neuroscience principle to effect the desired outcome. So let me welcome to all these 3 important eminent guests today. But before handing over to them, I would like to request to all the participants, there are certain quizzes are designed in between the program. So please keep your mobile phone handy so that whensoever the speaker asks that you can do that. So with this, I would like to welcome to all the eminent speakers once again over to Team KORN FERRY for a great learning experience. Thank you very much. Over to KORN FERRY team.
Thank you, Maninder, for the very, very flattering introduction. I didn't know who you were talking about. It didn't sound like me. Very flattering. But pleasure to be here. In the last 4 odd weeks, the KORN FERRY team has been speaking to CEOs and CHROs all over the country and a few of them across the world to understand what's going on, because nobody really has any ready-made answers for this. I was reading yesterday that one of the most overused words in the last 6 weeks is the word unprecedented, and no surprise because we are living through unprecedented times. And what we hope to share with you today is a synthesis of everything that we're hearing across industries. And what we are going to look at is to share what we understand of good leadership. What are leaders doing in times like this? What does this mean for organization and culture? And then we didn't just want it to be a theory session. So sometime at the end, we are also going to put pressure on you to ask you, what are you going to do differently now that you're equipped with the insights we've shared? So those are the broad 3 areas we will cover today. Moving on, what we are discovering is that what COVID has done to us is create 3 types of shock. Yeah, there's demand shock, in that demand has literally been switched off, partly thanks to the lockdown. There's supply shock. Again, the lockdown means supplies can't reach us, we can't reach them to our customers. And then there's financial shock, in that suddenly the taps of cash flow have been shut down for a majority of the firms. And taken all together, these seem like frightening times indeed. And I was reminded of this really wonderful quote by Charles Dickens from his book called The Tale of Two Cities, where he says it was the worst of times, but it was also the best of times. It was the season of darkness, but it was also the season of light. It was a winter of despair, but it was also the spring of hope. And why I'm sharing this is, while everything may look scary around us at this point in time, the reality is we are all going to come out of it. And hopefully Nishith and I will spread a little more light on some insights that you can use to navigate COVID.
So in response to the 3 economic shocks, our experience has been that most organizations have actually experienced a leadership shock. Many leadership teams were caught unaware. They got into reactive mode. Only a few of them saw it coming, and fewer still were well prepared ahead of time for what ensued in this pandemic. Irrespective, all leaders and all organizations have to prepare for the 4 phases together. Phase 1 really is about surviving. As Jack Ma has recently said, if in this year, if you survive, you have made a profit. All you need to do right now is essentially trying to stay alive. The focus here is going to be around cash. If you move to the next slide, it'll be around cash. It'll be around managing employees' safety, which of course is paramount, and also ensuring that critical elements of our supply chain are being managed. Most organizations, especially in the pharma sector, are experiencing phase 1 and phase 2 together. So on phase 2, you're essentially seeing elements of manufacturing being restarted or augmented. And this is where organizations and leadership teams will have to start making choices of what kind of customer needs will they prioritize first. Our clients, L'Oreal, for example, told us that they don't anticipate most people buying lipstick or nail polish, but everybody will rush to the stores to buy hair color the moment things open up. And similarly, across all industries, you will have certain products that you will have to push through much faster than the others. The other element that we are finding here is that while the initial phase of the lockdown was focused on providing employees with safety, at this stage, there's a lot more at stake. Many employees today realize that they have elderly parents at home, they have young children at home, and they live in an area where it is not possible to contain themselves at home. And therefore, organizations need not only provide them with security, but they have to provide them with assurance of health as they move forward, not just for themselves, but for their entire families. It came to one of our clients as a surprise that in areas where they lifted the lockdown partially, a large number of their employees actually did not show up because they wanted to safeguard their family's interests, and they were willing to forego cash incentives that were offered to them in lieu of the safety of their family.
Thanks, Mr. Helpful. In fact, everywhere we speak, whether it's consumer or pharma, we are being told that the turnout is between 35 to 50%. And it just reinforces the pressure on us to provide assurance to our employees. There's going to be 2 more phases. Now, everybody is going to go through phase 1 and phase 2, right? Everybody has to survive. Everybody has to return. But we believe only a few firms will go to phase 3, which is rebound, and even fewer will go to the phase 4, which is reimagine. The key in phase 3 is really to recover quicker than your competitors. People who recover quicker than their competitors and therefore are able to ensure the right supply at the right time will have a chance to capture market share. It's also possible that you may leapfrog your competitors and go from 4th to 3rd or 3rd to 2nd. So that's the opportunity. So while survive and return are problems, opportunities sit in rebound and rematch. It's also a great time to scan the market for available talent. We've been speaking to some digital firms, and they said that many startups are starting to collapse because of low cash. So it's a great time to hire digital talent. The pharma industry is going to need to go digital really, really quick, whether it is in the supply stage or the distribution phase or the sales initiatives. And we think this is a great time to build digital capability for the organizations. Alliance scanning is to look around you and find partnerships that earlier never made sense. A brilliant example that we are sharing is how ITC Foods has tied up with Domino's. So today you can order your atta and dal and it will be delivered to your door by Domino's. And the question is this only a short-term partnership, or is this going to change the way ITC delivers their product to the consumer? And that's rebound. Moving to reimagine. So reimagine is where we are saying there are going to be some leadership teams that are going to be sharper, and they will not waste the lessons of this crisis. So they're going to come back and completely remodel themselves. You must have, all of you, read how TCS is saying that in a few years, 75% of their people will work from home. That's a huge shift, especially given that TCS currently has 4.5 lakh employees. So imagine just the saving on real estate and the complete shift in model. We were speaking to a CEO yesterday, and he said if TCS does what they do and we all follow suit, this is going to change the dynamics of diversity. The ability to hire physically differently abled people, the ability to hire women will go up because they will be comfortable at working from home and not have to go through coming to work. So it's possible that the demographics of the workforce can go through a significant shift. A lot of organizations in COVID are seeing a significant fat being thrown up. Certain functions that during COVID are suddenly emerging as over busy, and some functions not having enough work to do. We were speaking to Swiggy yesterday, and they said that suddenly their entire supervisory layer, they have a few thousand, is seeming quite redundant. They believe they can get by with 30% as many supervisors as they have today. So we believe many firms are going to come back out of COVID having reimagined themselves. For the pharma industry, we believe Salesforce capability is going to be a big one. Nishith and I spoke this morning to our colleague in China to understand what's going on there. And apparently it's the same situation there. Hospitals, doctors aren't allowing medical reps to come in. And so we said, well, what are these guys doing? They're saying, they're adopting WeChat, they're adopting all kinds of virtual means of selling and digital engagement with doctors and their buyers, because there really is no choice. So people are very, very quickly moving to virtual ways of working. Over to you, Amrita. Sorry.
The three learnings that we've had here are, one, many organizations are not spending enough time on phase 2 and phase 3. Two, many of them are stuck on phase 1 and 2. And finally, your cash position obviously is one determinant of this. But the second important determinant is really the leadership trust and balance that had been created before the crisis hit. So we would like to ask you, moving to the next slide, what which of these 4 phases are you spending the most amount of bandwidth in? In order to do this, please take out your mobile phones and open your web browser. So open Chrome or Safari as you use. And on that, log on to a website called menti.com. That's menti, MENTI.com. Open your phone browser, log on to the website menti.com, and you will be asked for a code. Please enter the code 533633. That's 533633. The question here is, what are you spending the most amount of time in? We have an early bird entry, says the return phase, survive. As you submit your entry, we will see here which ones are you spending the most amount of time on. You do have a leader who's spending time in the reimagine phase as well as rebound phase. Here is a war of skyscrapers as more entries start to come in. Gurprriet, what would you say? What are we at Korn Ferry spending the most amount of time on?
I think 1 and 2 and a little bit of 3.
Yeah.
You know, in all our interviews, what we are discovering is that a majority of teams are on 1 and 2, but we are also discovering that a few have made the shift to rebound and reimagine. Interestingly, we're finding that digital businesses have probably hit rebound or reimagine a little quicker than more traditional businesses.
As is very apparent here, most of us and most of our leadership teams are perhaps spending the maximum amount of time in the return phase. And it depends upon the strength of the organization, how well prepared were we, and how quickly have we been able to act and group teams within our organizations to focus on rebound and reimagine. We do have 19 now leaders here who believe that they are spending a lot of time in the rebound and reimagine phase. Please write to us separately. We'd love to know more about this. The point here is that several organizations are deploying separate teams across these 4 stages because the mindset and the leadership that is needed for these 4 are different. And at the same time, while phase 4 may be a little out time-wise, but we all need to plan for all of these 4 phases together.
In case a few of you are thinking of questions you would like to ask, please use the Q&A feature. We're collecting those questions offline, but feel free if something strikes you that you want to check in with us on.
Like Ashish has just said, is survival, return, and rebound possible without reimagining? Ashish, you have a point here that across the board, there is a little bit of reimagining that is needed. The way we are seeing this is that fundamental shifts in your business model, in your talent capability, in your organization design will take place in the reimagine phase. So one of our clients are saying, why do we need so many layers in the organization? Right? We just need agile teams and we need one sponsor at the CXO level, and that solves. Why can't we become a network of teams? An idea that was mooted in several industries earlier on, but it never got enough traction. It has suddenly become very apparent today. Doing digital was the trend, till 3 months back. It's become apparent that today you have to be digital and not just do digital. And therefore, some of the reimagine phase elements will require fundamental rewiring of the organization, and therefore it is going to be a little harder. But you're right. There are elements of reimagine that happen at all of these phases. So with this, let's move back to our slide deck and essentially focus on, given that these are the 4 phases that we all need to prepare for. The question is, what leadership do we need in order to tide through these times? I'm reminded of Winston Churchill, who said, never let a good crisis go to waste. But more importantly, if you notice, his popularity ratings during wartime were very different from his peacetime ratings. He was almost reviled as a peacetime leader, even though he was one of the most celebrated wartime leaders in his time. So moving on, what we've in our interactions with leaders that we have had over the last month or so, there are 4 successful personas or archetypes of leaders that we have encountered, and we'd like to share, and there'll be more, but we'd like to share 4 that particularly stood out for us and were very relevant given the times. One of our clients, managing directors in a company which is based in Silicon Valley and in India, saw the pandemic break out a lot earlier than others and decided to force all his employees to work from home 2 days in a week, starting almost end of January. At this moment, he was called an early alarmist. People did not see the point of what he was trying to say and felt that the measures that he implemented were draconian. Over the next couple of weeks, they ironed out not only their infrastructure, which is dongles and laptops and what have you, but they also managed the cadence and the governance around working from home, managing stuff at home, and doing all your calls and all your reviews online. By the time the pandemic hit and the lockdown was announced, they were already a lot ahead than other organizations in their industry. This obviously requires you to not just think strategically, but see ahead, take bold steps, demonstrate courage as leadership capabilities that you need to demonstrate. We have many examples of how leaders are demonstrating empathy across the board, and 2 that particularly resonated with us, especially because they are so simple. In one organization, they realized that over the 10 months or so of the previous financial year, they have pretty much accrued the bonus that they were accruing for the last financial year. And many organizations that we know have deferred their performance cycle. But this organization said, why can't we just calculate the bonus for 10 months and disperse it right now? Disperse it right now because all employees will currently need the cash. And therefore, they've just gone ahead and done it. That money was lying with them anyway. It had already accrued. And it took them just a little bit more of management effort in order to get it done. But something that really touched the lives of their employees. They have also done something even more amazing. Right in the first few days when the lockdown was announced, they hired cabs and took the chairs that were lying in the office and got them through to their employees so that their employees can have better seating at home. And we heard the story when Gurprriet and I particularly were complaining of a backache because we've been sitting on these rather non-ergonomic chairs for a while now. They've done many more things like tie up with Max and Apollo, Max and Fortis hospitals across India for preferential treatment of their employees and also their families as well as their in-laws. Now, all of these are very small things that costed them almost nothing. But it was the care and the concern that they demonstrated at the time that made into the stories.
Super. Thanks, Nishith. Difficult times also call for difficult decisions. And one of the kinds of leaders that you need to show up at times like this is the prescriptive leader. Prescriptive leader primarily focuses on making the difficult decisions that need to be made at this time. The prescriptive leader also drives a sense of urgency and pushes people towards quick decisions. So the prescriptive leader's archetype is all about speed. It's all about responding with a sense of urgency, almost as if the house is on fire. You don't debate who will get in which side of the line or which color buckets to use. The prescriptive leader says, form a line, get the buckets, start the water chain going. That's the prescriptive leader's job. But during COVID, prescriptive leaders have also had to take difficult decisions on cash conservation, who to pay now, who to pay later, knowing that some of these may be vendor partners with several years of history with the firm. But the decision had to be made, somebody had to take it, and that was the space for the prescriptive leader. Prescriptive leaders are also the ones who are going to do well in the reimagine phase because they're going to question all the holy cows and all the legacies, all the beliefs in the firm that say, yahan aise nahi ho sakta hai. Those are the bastions that the prescriptive leader will shatter. Lastly, we come to the multiplier leader. As you may have gathered, within these 4 phases, there's a lot of work to be done. And one leadership team can just not focus on all 4 at the same time. Even if you look at the recover phase, there's something about getting manufacturing back on track. There's distribution, there's vendors, there's raw material, there's cash, there's getting people back to work. So multiplier leaders are shifting the leadership style and method from command and control to federated, multiple, agile, spread out work teams. When we were speaking to the CEO of L'Oreal, for example, they have a people work stream, which is taking care of engagement, but is also already looking ahead to assurance, already looking ahead to planning how much workforce they will need as each district starts to open up, and how to make sure that that workforce shows up. They have a vendor work stream. So brilliant example. They started one of their plants, their boxes of product were ready. They called the carton person, and guess what? The carton guy had shut down. And so they realized that we are going to have to analyze every big and small vendor in our entire supply chain. And so the vendor work stream was created. Similarly, a distributor work stream was created to check on the health and availability of all their distributors. They have a Salesforce work stream. They have a cash flow and cost control work stream. So the multiplier leader shifts from command and control to these multiple networked, federated, self-managed teams. That's what multiplier leaders.
The question here is, which one is the best persona of them all? Or is there one style that is more important than the other? And as you'd imagine, the answer is no. Each of these styles are equally important, and perhaps the most successful teams, leadership teams, are able to demonstrate or have leaders who bring in these diverse skills, and together they are able to demonstrate all of these. Each one of these, by the way, can be measured through the KORN FERRY's 4 dimensions of leadership framework, where we measure elements like, on the next slide, where we measure elements like competencies and experiences, which is what people have done, but also more importantly, inherent drivers and traits that really motivate people and provide them a sense of purpose and fulfillment. A lot of the things that you see around being the lighthouse, being the prescriptive leader, being the empathetic leader, really comes from very deep down drivers that leaders have, and has very little to do with their capabilities or competencies.
Nishith, can I quickly take a question?
Yes, please.
So there's a question around each of these archetypes should come alive depending on the context. Are you seeing leaders who are able to effectively modulate and transition between these styles? And if yes, how? That's a great question. It's very hard for any one person to hold all 4 of those archetypes or to, shuffle between them. But what we are seeing is that in any one leadership team, different people show up at different times and demonstrate that archetype. So we also believe that this is about leadership and not about a leader. I hope that helps.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now is the time when you want to ask you, when you think of your leadership team in your organization, and these results are anonymous, please tell us which archetype is being least demonstrated by your leadership team. In order to do this, please log back onto your web browser, and you will find the page on Menti being refreshed. It's again on menti.com. The page will automatically refresh. And here the question is, which archetype is being least demonstrated by your leadership team?
Interesting that prescriptive is the first one to show up, Nishith.
Show up, and also the least.
Yeah, yeah.
And once again, we'd like to reiterate that these results are entirely confidential. Even we don't have access to who's filling in what. So feel free, and we thank you in advance for sharing this in a transparent and honest manner with us.
Interesting.
And we hope that all of you are answering the question, what archetype is being demonstrated the least. So Gurprriet, as the results are coming in, I'd like to hazard a guess on what we are seeing here. We're seeing that in peacetime, a lot of focus has been around the concepts of collaboration, inclusive leadership, participative leadership, taking everybody along, and so on. The question we have is that during wartime, you need some of these collaborative ways of working to give way to things that are more time sensitive. When there's a house on fire, you need a firefighter. And that is where a lot of leadership teams may have gotten stumped, where they felt they ran into decision paralysis. They ran into areas where it was like a set of deer caught in the headlights, where things were moving a lot faster than they were anticipating, and they were in react mode. And perhaps that may be governing this element around the prescriptive leadership style being the least demonstrated by your leadership team.
Yeah, I'm also wondering, Nishith, it's very hard to let go of empathy and humaneness. And maybe some leaders are struggling with the prescriptive style even because of that. But certainly leadership shock is a reality, just the way you've called out. And it's possible we are seeing the deer in headlights. I've also noticed that the challenge with managing ambiguity is sometimes you want to be consensual. And so it's possible people are defaulting to that rather than taking charge.
Absolutely. And last point on this before we move back is that if your leadership team is not being prescriptive about anything, then it is not, in this wartime scenario, it is not a desirable trait. There may be elements where you may be missing the opportunity to be ahead of the curve. Just like our client, the early alarmist, whom we called the lighthouse. When he was doing things in January that others did in March, what are you doing in May that you will talk about in September as you being the first ones to have got it off the ground?
Yeah, and the thought I want to leave you with is, are you being prescriptive where it's needed? So while it's easy to rate our leaders, what's your own self-assessment of yourself? Are you making some difficult decisions? Are you pushing the envelope? Are you questioning the holy cows? That's something for you to reflect on.
Great. Moving back to our slide deck, I think the next question that we had is, given the context, we all experience a leadership shock, and we noticed that there are 4 leadership styles that were successful in this time. knowing that in our leadership teams, the prescriptive style is the one that is least demonstrated by the teams of the participants on this webinar. The second question that we have is around how do we organize ourselves in times of this crisis as well as beyond. The analogy that comes to our mind here on the next slide is really around the classical music concert and the jazz band. In a classical musical concert, you have a conductor at the top who is acutely controlling the behavior and the response of each and every person in the band. Each person in the band has a sheet in front of them that they are adhering to, and you'd notice their expressions versus that of the jazz band, where none of them have any sheets. They don't have a conductor. All they're doing is they're playing off each other, responding in real time, and creating music that is unprecedented in a sense, as in response to unprecedented times. So the same analogy is what we want to cover in what we call agile teams. In this time, each of these jobs to be done needs to be orchestrated by fully empowered, self-organized, agile teams. These teams are not just cross-functional teams. Please note that in cross-functional teams, each member from a different function represents that function. This is not a cross-functional team. This is a team which comprises people from different functions that are there to get the job done. They are connected with the central command and control, but they are essentially empowered to get the job done on the ground. So you'd notice, for example, in the return phase, there's a lot of focus we need to create on in-location teams for manufacturing, supply, or what have you. There are teams that need to manage your critical vendors and ensure that they are financially stable as well. And finally, not only do you need teams to manage your people, but you also need to manage elements around their logistics, their safety, their assurance, and what have you.
Similarly, you're going to need agile teams for the rebound and the reimagine phase. And like Nishith said earlier, we have to be running these phases concurrently. It's not a sequential journey where only after return is done do we move to rebound and then move to reimagine. I was speaking to the CEO and MD of Diageo yesterday morning, and I asked him, I said, so, what's one thing you leaders have done differently during this phase? He said, we took care most of the operations with all our work streams that we set up. So we as leaders had time on our hands. So guess what they did? They did long-range planning. He said all the things that we never had the luxury of time to do because we were so operationally busy, we've done during this time. So they have spent a lot of their time in reimagining, right? And as we look at both the rebound and reimagine phase, we believe you'll need work streams. One, to look at, let's say, your external talent. What's the kind of talent we don't have in the pharma industry, but we are going to need and is therefore going to be available? So who's working on that? What are practices that consumer firms are adopting? What are digital firms like Swiggy doing that we can learn from and adopt in our industry? So there's an emerging practices theme. In the org phase, certainly in the reimagine phase, certainly reimagining the organization of the future. An org delayering team, a team that's focusing on the new capabilities, whether it is leading agile teams, whether it is selling virtually, whether it is digital marketing. In fact, digital is going to be a massive thrust across all industries, and specifically we believe for pharma. So a digital capability team is a must in the reimagine phase.
So the question here is, what is it that you can do in this time? We are seeing several questions come up in the panel that that Raja will moderate for us shortly. But before we sign off to him, there are two quick questions we wanted to ask you. This is a Menti question, so please open your phones once again. And the first question that we will ask you is that what's the one thing that has become most apparent to you in this time that you will actually go back and do? Please feel free to write anything. Keep your answers short. And as and when you type and submit, we will see those answers scroll up on this window. What's the one thing that has become apparent or important for you as a result of this discussion? Let's aim to get at least 30 inputs in.
You know, both these responses, actually all three, all four, are so similar to everything we're hearing, isn't it, Nishith, even across the industry?
Absolutely. In fact, it always comes to us as a surprise when several CEOs and leaders admit that they want to be spending a lot more time on phase 3 and phase 4, but they're completely consumed in the first two.
Yeah, I like that point on the customer connect. That's the other thing we are forecasting. We are going to have to be very, very agile at keeping in touch with the customers, because consumer preferences, consumers' styles of buying are all going to change significantly. Nishith, what is it you talk about when you talk about, what do you say, polarized customers, don't you?
Yeah, many customers are waiting for the lockdown to go back to their original products that they wanted, as well as ways in which they engage with you. However, there will be a new breed of equally strong customers who will want different kinds of products. You're already seeing on Amazon, do-it-yourself salon kits are being sold, where you have the scissors, the brush, and everything that you need to in order to give yourself a haircut. Nobody would have bought this product a little while back. Your customers are going to be polarized. Some will want the old normal back. Some will engage with you completely differently. Which ones will you go for?
Excellent. Should we move on, Nishith?
Absolutely. Thank you for these elements. We also have one quick question from you, that in this time, there are several agendas that have become very clear. There is digital transformation. All of us have to be digital organizations at the core. Our rewards and salaries will shift. Our sales force will need completely new skills. The way we organize ourselves will change, as well as we need future leadership capabilities. If you were to do our next webinar with you, what is it that you would like to learn more about? Looks like we'll need not one, but 4 more webinars with you. Great. As these results keep pouring in, Raja, we'd love to hand over to you. You've been receiving several questions, and I'm sure you have several of your own as well.
Oh, no. Yeah. Thank you very much to the team, Nishith and Gurprriet. Fantastic listening to you. Sometimes these seem obvious when you sit back and look at them, but on a day-to-day working, I think all of us completely miss out on these. And I think it's good that we do this check once in a while to see, how we're all feeling about this situation. I think there are very clearly a few things that I picked up from here, which are very important. I think the first is the consistent message that, don't waste the crisis. because I think it's very important as leadership that, we are in it, we are fighting it, but we should not waste it. And we need to operate simultaneously on 4 horizons, whether it's, starting from survive to reimagining. And I think that point has come through very clear. The second really is to look at, this is a great time to look at the organization, both for today and future, and adjust your talent in order to be able to manage that. And I think the other piece which we should all remember is that whatever happens, this is not the period to compromise on safety. In every stage, we don't know when this situation is going to end. And I think we need to, as leaders, even in the area of safety, look at it in 4 horizons, beyond just surviving the safety risk, but also reimagining it as we begin to move on. So I have a few very interesting questions from people. They've been but the one which I want to kick off with is one from Harshad, which is that this is, becoming a completely low-touch economy, right? We are talking to each other digitally. We are not engaging physically. There is no hugging going on. There are no post-its that we are putting on the wall. How do you expect to drive a culture agenda in an organization when people are actually not physically meeting each other? Yeah, and one of the things that's very important to drive culture, at least in the way we've been used to, is for there to be a lot more what I would call physical interaction and bonding.
That's a great question. Again, you've touched on something that the MD of Diageo told us yesterday. So we said, what's your biggest takeaway? He said, my biggest takeaway is how, even though we've been virtual for a significant number of weeks now, leadership has been able to inspire, engage, and connect with people. And I said, okay, so what do you think it is? And he said, for the short term, I think it is because it all feels like we are in it together. We are at home, our teams are at home, we are all doing it for the health and, what's good for the nation and good for all of us. But even the question he left us with was, I wonder how this will sustain if this becomes the new normal. And there's no right answers yet, but certainly communicating, staying in touch, and over leveraging empathy. I was speaking to a gentleman from a PE firm yesterday. They tend to be the more analytical, numeric, very hard leaders. And they said they've now started a WhatsApp group and they now have a monthly check-in just to check on each other at a human level. Nothing to do with business, nothing to do with work. And we're also seeing Zoom calls, people doing drinking parties on Zoom calls, Antakshari on Zoom calls. So they're finding ways. But like I said, there's no one answer. Nishith?
Yeah. Culture usually is defined by the stories that matter to you personally, that happened recently. And at this time is the perfect opportunity to shape culture by actually doing things that matters to people. One of our clients thought that this is the time that their employees would like to reskill and learn new things. And when they look the database of which programs had been accessed, it was not new areas, but it was their own core areas that they wanted to strengthen further on, so that they have a better job at better opportunity of retaining their job. This is design thinking. It's not about what you think they need. It's about what they say that they need. And leaders who are able to put their finger on this will actually create culture better in this time.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pick up a question and a related point on this. It's a difficult one, but there are a lot of changes happening. And I think one of the things which people are concerned are about jobs, right? That they may be under threat, and there are these emotions to handle. At the same time, just to build on it, we are also talking a lot about finding the right talent at this time, reorienting the organization. Isn't this all going to create a sense of anxiety at a time when people actually need the maximum amount of reassurance? And how are you going to handle, how do you sort of, recommend that people should handle and reconcile between transformation and anxiety and job losses and all that goes around with it.
Yeah.
Nishith, you want to go first?
Yeah. So I loved what Gurprriet said a moment back. We're all in this together. Just a few weeks back, in KORN FERRY, we had our moment of reckoning where suddenly, from it being a live mint post, it was us who were taking hard decisions for our future. So I think the message there was the fact that let's get real. If you're on this Zoom call, then all of us and the people whom we interact with are probably the best of the whole world who's reconciling with this. Beyond this, we will come out a shiny new penny depending upon the choices we make at this time. There are no straight answers. It's affecting each and every person. It's not an industrial shock. It is not a demand shock. It's all of the shocks put together. And therefore, if we can survive and if we can manage this through to the end, the choices we make at this time will make the big difference. So can we learn something new? Can we be memorable to people around us? Can we have 2 or 3 things that we come back to this time and said, in the lockdown, this is what I was proud of. And this is what I did for myself, my employer, my customer, or what have you, or my society and my nation.
So let me push it a bit more. I mean, let me ask you, let's say leaders who are there, leading large teams and responsible, how should they behave? And what is it expected out of them to, address this anxiety?
I think 2 things. See, this is a time when the parent in us collides with the adult in us. This is a time when a leader wants to be paternalistic and patriarchal because there's the humaneness and the empathy that's going on inside your heart. But the market reality is if we have to survive, we have to be lean, efficient, and competitive. The secondary risk of COVID, post-COVID, is that some firms are going to radically reinvent the way we work. Let me just take an example. If TCS implements the point, 75% people working from home and others adopt it, the commercial real estate industry is going to be devastated. Now, what will that industry do then to survive? What choices do they have? And similarly, if TCS is doing it and therefore reducing cost of operation, can a Wipro stay behind? They cannot. So I think leaders will have to straddle both the prescriptive leader as well as the empathetic leader. On the one end, you have to make a choice between saving everybody versus the greater good of all. On the other end, you have to be extremely adult and let people know as far in advance as you can of what good and bad looks like so that they have time to prepare, and then operate from empathy and try and offer methods to either reskill or repurpose that manpower or find out placement for them. If not that, then at least try and be as graceful and give them as dignified moving on as possible. But we would be putting our heads in the sand if we avoided the fact that for some layers, some areas of an org, this is going to happen.
Raja, I'd just like to add one small thing, that just like everybody remembers what they were doing when they learned about 9/11, when they saw the Twin Towers crash, everybody will remember what they did, what their friends and family did, and what their organizations did at this time. Let's not lose this opportunity to be memorable to people around us.
Thank you. Let me ask another question on this. I think we're talking a lot about reimagining, but everything about reimagining seems to be around digital. Is that sort of the big theme around reimagining, or are there more shades of reimagining when we are looking at this situation post-COVID?
Yeah.
Nishith, go first.
Yeah. So actually, the companies that are doing well were the ones who had the last mile connectivity to the customer. So if there's first thing that we'll say, it's the primacy of owning the customer, owning, knowing, and accessing the customer. Number 2, it was how fast the leadership teams had moved which was in turn dependent upon the visibility that they had of the organization. There are many organizations that only today are saying you can send us a digitally signed invoice. Why for the last 30 years have we not done that? Why did it need a COVID to get us to do some of these things today? So our point here is digital, it's not about the technology. It is about our ways of working and our culture. And of course, the infrastructure that we have to provide visibility on our people, to provide visibility on our goods across the supply chain, and so on. But primarily, it is about the digital mindset and digital culture rather than digital technology.
So it will be, in some sense, a backbone of the reimagination, which was likely to happen everywhere, isn't it? In some form or the other. And let's not sort of avoid that piece of it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, digital will go from being seen as the enabler to actually being the backbone. You put it really well. It'll be the skeleton, and then we will align around the skeleton. There will be some changes that are non-digital, like just reshaping the firm. But again, honestly, we will reshape it based on a digital model. So,
okay, we have a lot of HR people in this meeting for sure. So I'm going to put them into a bit of a spotlight now. So what do you think the HR function can do in most organizations to plan for these 4 phases?
So I think
I know the normal thing is it's everybody's job, but I'm saying but let's make sure that we give some accountability to HR in a HR meeting. Yeah, so
for sure. So I think the first step really is to be interventional versus be just supportive, which is to challenge the leadership on ways of working and to challenge the leadership on spending time in all the 4 phases, to enable the leadership team to realize in several cases that they have to be multipliers, that they can't do this alone. And therefore, we need a set of federated, empowered work teams rather than center holding command and trying to do everything, because that's guaranteed to fail. So those are some. Then the second is HR is going to have to tread that thin line or that fine knife edge more than they've ever had to, which is to look at the management and then look at the people and find a middle ground. When it comes to questioning the holy cows of org design and just reshaping the whole organization, HR is going to have to step up and demonstrate a lot of courage to make some fairly difficult decisions, backed with empathy, which comes hard at times because, like I said, it's that knife edge. And the last one is just technology adoption. Actually, if you look at most organizations, it's the sales teams to start with, or the B2C teams that have been the most quickest adopters of digital. HR will have to go the same way.
Yeah.
So those are mine. Nishith.
Yeah, carry the culture of the organization and ensure that your actions and the stories that they are creating is in line with what your organization's values are. Again, anything that you do today will be memorable. Let's not lose this opportunity. And finally, on the leadership team, if you have any of the 4 personas missing, please ensure that you have a workaround on that, because we need all 4 in your leadership team at this stage.
Interesting. And there's somebody who is some hope has asked, which department do you think will be the least affected in this COVID crisis? I mean, is there something that you think will remain untouched?
That's a great question.
A great question. Hard to say. A tongue-in-cheek answer is the most useful one, of course.
Which is going to be, unfortunately, the technology. I mean, it's not going to be the human resources function. It will be the technology and the digital function.
Yeah. So how, you talked about different styles. So how do people, move from one style to the other, or even develop the ability to move from one style to other? Because, everyone suddenly in a COVID crisis, you can't be figuring out the 4 styles and discovering them, right? So how should people sort of develop it for themselves and move from one style to another? Is it situational or is it more internal?
It's situational, which is the easy answer, really. The question is, how do I do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think the encouragement is to be extremely conscious of the context. So before you step into any decision making, before you step into any conversation, first examine the context and then ask yourself, which archetype does this require? And by context, I don't just mean the 4 phases that we've called out. By context, I mean what is important right now. Is it a greater good situation, or is it a situation of inspiring? And then automatically, you might need one of the other styles. So it's really about very conscious awareness of the context and then matching the style.
Right. I'm combining a couple of questions, but around the theme of decentralizing. Yeah. At a time, on one hand, it is about decentralizing decision making. If you want to build an agile organization, at the same time, this is also a high risk time around safety, around supply. So how does one sort of develop, this balance between, you have a temptation to centralize it so that nothing goes wrong, and at the same time, you have to decentralize it to, so what's your sort of thought on how organizations should manage this?
Yeah, Nishith, your space.
Yeah, in Singapore, there's a bank called DBS. It was earlier the Development Bank of Singapore. It was a government bank. It was there as the State Bank of India. It now looks better than Citibank or Morgan Stanley. It's one of the world's most accredited bank. The government of Singapore has introduced a concept where as your card is exiting a machine, there is a jitter that has been introduced in order to stop replicating covers, fraudsters to essentially copy your magnetic strip. So if that jitter exists, it basically ensures that only your card comes in and goes out, the magnetic strip doesn't. So this has been mandated by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. One of the employees at DBS noticed that many of the DBS ATMs were having very long queues, and decided to take a unilateral decision of removing that jitter and thereby increasing the cycle time and reducing the queue. The Monetary Authority of Singapore wrote to Piyush Gupta, the CEO, saying this employee needs to be punished because he has broken the rule. DBS Bank, on the other hand, gave him an award and celebrated that as a example of customer centricity. Now, today we are not talking about today it's a matter of life and death. We do acknowledge, but we feel that for far too long in the financial services industry, and even more so in the pharma industry, we have erred on the side of the regulator, of caution, of risk mitigation. Now is the time when the realities on the ground are unfolding by the minute, and we need to empower our teams that yes, there will be mistakes, but an empowered decision taken 2 weeks in advance has a much greater upside at this stage than delaying for those 2 weeks.
If I may just build, it's a combination of decentralizing planning, exploring multiple scenarios, and then coming back with 2 or 3 decision scenarios. And what leadership teams have to get good at is being hands off but eyes on. Being hands on is the problem. So you can't be hands on everything. And therefore the federated teams take care of much of the operational load, and only those 20% of the critical decisions then come. And you have a governance mechanism to look after the rest.
Okay. So I have a question to both of you on this one. At these times, you find a group of leaders who are fantastic in crisis. Yeah. How do you spot these people? Because they may not typically be the talent you would spot in normal circumstances. And then once the crisis gets over, how do you find the value in the same people?
Wonderful. Nishith?
So both, how do you spot them and what do you do with them after you've found them?
Sure. Sure.
So any early signs of the 4 personas that you're seeing, any behavior that surprises you, and ties back to your earlier question, we must keep a note. HR must keep a note of employees that are stepping up and surprising them. This is what you will also need to discuss during the next talent review, which is what was your story? I mean, our next talent reviews and our next performance cycle is very simple. What is this person's COVID story? and all their behaviors will be demonstrated here. In terms of early behaviors, we can again use the 4 personas of was this person a lighthouse? Did this person demonstrate empathy? Was this person able to create a multiplier effect despite not having physical contact? And finally, when there was a fire, was he or she able to step up and douse the fire? These are 4 different ways in which people have been able to demonstrate leadership, and we must take a note of that, because that's what's going to be relevant today. To your second point, as wartime gives way to peacetime, will these people still be relevant? And our hypothesis is yes, because these are not capabilities or competencies that become less relevant or more relevant in some times. These are much more innate drivers and traits that are desired in organizations today.
Yeah, I'll just build on that, Nishith. That was so well said. I think this is a great time for spotting. So not just HR, but every leader must be looking within his function for surprises. Which people pleasantly surprise me? And jot it down. We also believe there will be a few disappointments. You'll have a few blue-eyed boys and girls who will just not rise up to this challenge. So it's important to note that. At the end of the day, the decision-making post this is its horses for courses. Some of the leaders you will therefore recognize are great for crisis and some are great for peacetime. But there will be some who will do well in both. So I would keep my eyes on those pleasant surprises even in peacetime to see how well they do. But the one encouragement I would give to every organization is, if you've had people who've surprised you pleasantly and your gut tells you you can take a punt on them, don't waste time. You need to double promote somebody, do it. Just do it. Just put that person into a critical responsibility and you will see them blossom. You see, when we talk about development, we say 70% of development happens on the job. It would be a pity if after the COVID crisis, you disbanded all your teams and this person went back to their suboptimal role, because they also tasted a degree of freedom and empowerment. And we must capture that spirit and push it into a job that
Super. There are a series of questions, and I think it obviously means that we've not answered it well enough. So I'll make it very direct. Are you seeing a reduction in field forces strength in companies, considering that companies will begin to focus more on digital? As people who are in this industry, are you seeing a reduction of that happening?
Not yet. It's very, very, very early days. You see, and if I may make it, relevant to pharma, we are not only talking about changing the way we sell or go to market, but I don't know whether the doctor or the hospital is going to change the way they receive us. So I actually think that you may end up repurposing some talent or creating a new function, which is around enabling change in the ecosystem. I think the whole pharma industry has a massive potential for ecosystem change. And to me, that's the opportunity,
Interesting. I think before I hand over to Dara, I might want to just ask one last question, which is over here, which is saying, what is more important, the manager in me or the leader in me at this situation? So it's a very, very interesting question. And maybe there is another related one, which is saying that as human beings or as people, social animals, we are, we look for leaders above to guide us, but our leaders themselves are today extremely insecure. So what's it that we can do to make sure that our leaders succeed?
Nishith, you want to take the first one? I'll take the second.
Yeah. So manager versus leader. That's a very tough one. I personally look at this through the lens of the story that you will tell. What story will you tell others around what you did for everybody, right? For yourself, importantly for yourself, all the way to the nation. What is it that you did? And perhaps, and all of that requires different personas, manager, leader, what have you. But at the core of it, I think there is a need for an achievement here. There's a need to tell a story. and there's a need to write this next chapter of our lives. In our teams, we are encouraging as many people as we meet to say, how do you make this time memorable for yourself? Do not let this time slip. And I think that's the best way I could answer this.
Oh, beautiful, Nishith. So inspiring, so inspiring. Very well said. On the piece around leaders and insecurity, look, leaders are humans. We tend to forget that. And leaders are insecure whether there is COVID or there is no COVID, because the higher up you go, the chain of command, the more difficult decisions get pushed upwards. I can't tell you what a horrible week Nishith and I had in the week that we were going through our survive numbers and looking at our cash flows, looking at our revenue, looking at our cost structures, and then confronting some of the hard decisions we had to make. We both confessed that we didn't sleep very well for 2 nights, but we still made the decision. And making it, we know that if this thing gets worse, there will be somebody putting Nishith and my name on a list, and I won't rue it because it will be that leader's job at the end of the day.
Sure. So thank you, Nishith. Thank you, Gurprriet. Before I hand over to Dara, I think we all must be very, very proud of the industry we are in. Yeah, I think rarely does one get a chance to work in a industry, in organizations which are absolutely squarely in the middle of being, immensely relevant and, more importantly, solving a lot of things. I think we did a lot of talis standing out of our balcony for lots of, people in the country. But I think a large part of our industry is today, half of it is working from home, but the other half has to work out of home. And I think many of them, whether it's our supply guys, our factory people, are doing an absolutely fabulous job. So while this is a challenging time, as employees, we face the same issues, but I think, purpose is absolutely in the middle of what we do every day. And I think that should make it a very, very, blessed place to be in. So thank you very much to everybody who's been there. Dara, over to you to sort of give your final words on this session.
So thank you very much, Raja, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, OPPI. I think it was a fantastic learning for all of us. This crisis period, the difficult times have been made so easy for us by our wonderful speakers, Gurprriet and Nishith. So we must thank both of you. And Raja, the way you asked questions, you actually made them, you started them thinking out of the box, and I could make out that some of the questions were really so interesting for them also. They were delighted to answer them. So thank you very much. And there was so much of new learning in this. We got so many new catchwords and buzzwords like don't waste the crisis. So that was wonderful. Speed, agility, digital, reinvent. These are the themes that on which we are going to evolve ourselves, and the survival of the quickest. And certainly the rules of the games are going to change now. We need to continuously be active and alert, and only those who are very astute and who are sort of cat on the wall are the only ones who can survive here in these crises. And new leadership styles will emerge, as you said. So I must really thank OPPI and KORN FERRY for giving us this wonderful webinar today. Thank you very much. And from our personal side, people who run the associations, especially the 3 major associations of pharmaceutical and bulk drug manufacturers, let me tell you that this is for the first time in the history of OPPI, IDMA and IPA that the 3 association heads are working so closely that sometimes I feel I'm reporting to Anant and Sudarshan and not to my IDMA bosses, because we have a con call every day between 6 and 7 and we exchange ideas, we share our problems. So I hope that this system doesn't change once everything becomes hunky-dory and normal, because working together is really helping us. And I must tell you that I have learned in some of my multinational companies I've worked for, that some of the foreign bosses used to say at times you have to give a gift to your company. Don't keep expecting gifts from the company. And I think this is the time for all of us to give back to our associations, give back to our organizations, and rise to the occasion. So without much ado, thank you very much.
We have lost Mr. Patel.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I'll again repeat it. I would like to thank the KORN FERRY team, especially Rajiv Krishnan, Shilpa Gendela, Gurprriet Siingh, Nishith Mohanty, and Amrita Sian for an insightful and engaging webinar. Thank you, Rajaram, Managing Director, Sanofi, for moderating the session and very thought-provoking questions expressed by you. Of course, I've had the pleasure of listening to you in some of our IDMA meetings, and you've been a wonderful thinker, and you really make people think. That's one big quality of a leader today. Yeah. I must thank the OPPI team, Sharat Tyagi, the president, KG Anant Krishnan, as I said, my boss, the Director General of OPPI, Satya Narayanan, the OPPI HR Committee Chair and MD of Galderma, the South Asia, and then Maninder Singh Sawhney of OPPI HR Committee, the co-chair and the Managing Director of Lundbeck India. I must thank Bhavna Singh for coordinating all the activities and ensuring that all of us register in time. And I must thank the members of IPA and IDMA for having participated in a big way. And I must thank Anant and Sudarshan for the excellent coordination and support given to OPPI. And let's have more of the I'm sure all of you will once again register in large numbers and certainly may take advantage of this. So thank you very much once again, all of you. Stay well and stay safe. And thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge. And we are confident we'll all together get out of this crisis and emerge even more stronger and resilient. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you. And thanks to all the participants.
Yeah, we must thank all the participants. Wonderful participation.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all.